Hey, I'm the Stick for Your Historian, and this is the American series. Today, we're going to talk more about the Whiskey Rebellion. We talked last week about how the whiskey tax was affecting the lives of the Western Pennsylvanians, which, in a nutshell, it was ruining them. So, the Overmountain farmers got together and decided they wouldn't stand for this whiskey tax any longer. Their voice would be heard, one way or another. But first, they would try to get the tax abolished through peaceful means. In July 1791, a meeting was held at a wooden fort in Fayette County, with men from all over the area attending. Together, they chose delegates, which delegates is just another word for representatives, to go to a bigger government meeting that was supposed to happen in Pittsburgh in September. Hugh Henry Brackenridge was one of the delegates chosen that summer day at the wooden fort. A poet and a writer, a retired chaplain of the Revolutionary Army, an experienced lawyer, and amateur politician, Brackenridge was certainly no farmer. But the farmers trusted him to represent them, and he did his best. It was a difficult position for Brackenridge to hold, though. He wanted matters to be settled peacefully, and that was something a lot of the farmers he was representing weren't interested in. They meant business, cold steel and gunpowder kind of business, if that's what it took to get rid of this tax. Well, September came around, and the bigger meeting was held in Pittsburgh. There, a petition against the whiskey tax was written up and shipped off to Congress in Philadelphia. Because at this time, the American capital was there, instead of in Washington, D.C. It didn't move to Washington until 1800, actually. But things regarding governments can take a while, and an answer didn't come right away from Congress. In the meantime, the violence that Brackenridge had wished to avoid was becoming a stark reality. A tax collector named Robert Johnson was attacked by a gang of settlers. The poor man was tarred and feathered, just as the supporters of the British had been during the Revolution. And I know this graphic looks kind of funny, but honestly, tarring and feathering is really a cruel thing to do to someone. I mean, just imagine someone smearing boiling hot sticky stuff all over you, and then dumping feathers on your head. Yeah, not cool. I definitely don't endorse doing that to anyone for any reason. Anyway, a law officer was sent out to arrest the gangsters who had attacked Johnson, but he never completed his mission. The officer was ambushed along the road, where he received the same treatment as Johnson had, and worse. In the spring of 1792, Congress finally answered the Pennsylvanians' petition. "We won't get rid of the whiskey tax," they told the farmers, "but we'll compromise with you and reduce it." They cut the tax back to 8 cents per gallon instead of 9. As you might imagine, the farmers weren't overly impressed with this meager gesture. They didn't want compromise. They wanted the tax gone. Many of them simply refused to pay. There were more attacks on tax collectors all over the backcountry of Pennsylvania that year. Soon, too, there were protests and violence breaking out all over the western hinterlands of Maryland, Virginia, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Kentucky as well. Which, Kentucky isn't actually marked out on this map. Let me fix that. There we go. It was made a state this very year, interestingly enough. And the resistance to the tax in Kentucky was so strong, in fact, that nobody even thought of trying to collect the whiskey tax there. It seems that Hamilton's brilliant idea was making more people angry than he anticipated. But Hammy was responding with like for like. He had no sympathy for these pesky little farmers and their whims and disagreements. It was just a little tax. What was their problem? Hammy, with his cozy, high-paying job as Secretary of the Treasury, just couldn't fathom what it was like to have your livelihood threatened. All he knew was that all this tax protesting was really getting on his nerves. Who did these farmers think they were? This wasn't taxation without representation, he thought. They had representative government. This was nothing short of rebellion. Which, in a way, Hammy was right. They did have representation. But if you remember what we talked about regarding that in the last episode, we saw that their say in government was so tiny, it was easily swallowed up and overpowered by the big cities and big businessmen. So it was really like they had no representation at all. But, of course, Hammy didn't get it. He declared he would send soldiers into North Carolina to punish the people who wouldn't pay the tax. Thankfully, this never came to be. He was stopped by the Attorney General, Edmund Randolph. And just to give a bit of background here, the Attorney General acts as a kind of lawyer to the American government. Randolph said it was not legal for Hamilton to send soldiers into the state. And so, the trouble continued. In August, another meeting was had in Pittsburgh. This time, Breckinridge wasn't there. None of his peacemaking friends were there either, save for one fellow named Albert Gallatin. But Gallatin's voice was lost like a drop of spray within a hurricane. The leaders of the tax resistance had formed a sort of gang called the Mingo Creek Association. Together, they were determined to take the business of government into their own hands. The new American Republic could get lost.